If you're struggling with writing anxiety, try to imagine a positive audience. In this video, I'm going to talk about how actively imagining a positive audience can help manage anxiety related to fear of rejection. Lots of writers fear rejection. Makes perfect sense. Rejection is real and it's painful. If we show our work to somebody, if we submit it for publication or review, we risk rejection and negative feedback. Those always hurt. In addition to fearing future rejection and future negative feedback, many of us are troubled by painful memories of past rejection and negative feedback. The memory of that teacher who told us we couldn't write, or that professor who told us we were boring, come up as we try and write and interfere with our writing. So, rejection anxiety is realistic because, yes, it sucks to get your work rejected, and it could happen. Unfortunately, rejection anxiety is not productive. If we start feeling rejection anxiety, we often start thinking about what happens to us when we get rejected instead of thinking about how to make our manuscript better. And if the anxiety starts to rise, our prefrontal cortex is inhibited and our imagination and logical reasoning, which are processed in the prefrontal cortex, are inhibited. So rejection anxiety may be realistic, but it's not productive. To counter rejection anxiety, we want to anticipate the best. We want to imagine a positive audience. The first benefit from this, I think, is in a cognitive behavioral vein, the idea that we can change our mood or affect our mood by what we're thinking. If we start thinking about a negative audience, or we start remembering that professor who was mean to us, we can actively focus our attention on a positive audience instead. We can shift our attention from the thoughts of negative feedback to thoughts of a positive audience. Now, if you have had in your past somebody who liked your work and whose judgment you respected and trusted, think about them. Think about them instead of thinking about the teacher who told you you couldn't write. Think about the person who said, yeah, this is interesting work. But you can also imagine an ideal reader, create an ideal reader, the kind of person who would be interested in and excited about your work. You might ask whether it's realistic to imagine anybody being positive about your work. Some people might say, well, my work is so obscure that nobody will be interested. But of course, the world is filled with many different people with diverse interests. You got your interests from somewhere, probably from other people, but from somewhere. And what's to say that nobody else has drawn interest in the same places from the same sources? Other people might have been influenced in the same ways that you are to pursue the same obscure interests. So there are a lot of people in the world. Some of them will share your interests, most likely. You might say, well, my work is flawed, so nobody's going to like it. And, people can be positive about things even if they see flaws in those things. So your work doesn't have to be perfect for people to be enthusiastic about it. People are enthusiastic about imperfect things all the time. And they recognize those imperfections and they still enjoy the thing that they're enthusiastic about. So it is possible and realistic to imagine a positive audience. As a side note, if you would say, my work is so bad that nobody could ever like it, I think that's just a different set of anxieties. So that's more anxiety about your ability or your lack of ability. It's not really anxiety about how people will respond to your work. They're related, of course, but when you're thinking, I can't do anything because I'm not good enough, that's a different set of anxieties that we want to approach in a different way. So that's a different discussion. In addition to the anxiety reduction benefits of thinking about a positive audience, there are good practical reasons to imagine one too. Firstly, imagine a positive audience provides you insight into what they like and therefore into how to please them and how to write a manuscript that will please them. So thinking about a positive audience starts to turn your attention back to your work because you can say, How do I please this person? Secondly, you can get benefit from imagining a positive audience if you want to get into publishing. Publishers want to sell books, so they want to know who's going to buy them, who's going to read your stuff. If you're submitting a proposal directly to a publisher, to a nonfiction academic publisher, they'll ask you about the potential audience. They'll say, who's going to buy this? Who's going to read it and why? So there are practical benefits. For one, it helps give you guidance as to what to write. And for two, it helps you start preparing a book proposal in many cases, or helps prepare you for conversations with people in the publishing industry. I think it's worth turning this into a formal written exercise because you want to really focus on it and you want to practice writing at all times. So part of this exercise is to think of the individual characteristics of a person who might be interested in your work. What is that person like who might like your work? To some extent, I think this is a matter of thinking of your own characteristics and interests and assuming that others will share those characteristics. So who are those people? What do they like? What are their characteristics? What books do they buy? Who and what are their influences and sources? What are they looking for or hoping to accomplish with reading your book or reading your writing? All of these questions, if you try to answer them, give you insight into who might be enthusiastic about your work. And when you're doing this, think about what characteristic would make somebody enthusiastic about your work. And don't say, oh yeah, they're stupid. That's not helpful. Say they're interested in the same thing I'm interested in. So invent a positive audience. This is stuff that you can use in some book proposals. The second part of this exercise is to describe how your work serves that audience. So what features of your work would these people like? Why would they like those features, and what would make those features likable and valuable to them? And how can you work on your manuscript to bring those features forward in a way that grabs the attention of your reader? All of these questions are useful to you in guiding you in your writing efforts, and some of them are valuable for many book proposals. If you're proposing to a nonfiction academic publisher, you would be wanting to explain the special features of your book that make it different from its competitors, the features that will make people want to buy it. So this focuses your attention on the strengths of your work, what makes it special, and what makes your audience like it. In the short run, I hope that you can get some immediate anxiety relief just by switching your focus and switching your attention from memories of negative feedback or fears of negative feedback to memories of positive feedback and anticipation of future positive feedback. In the long run, if you're struggling with anxiety, we want to make it more of a habit that you think about the positive than the negative. We want to reduce the frequency that you think about negative audiences and increase the frequency that you think about positive audiences. To this end, it's useful to practice, and repetition helps. Every time you start thinking about a negative audience, open a blank page and work through this exercise again. It's a 5-minute exercise. You don't have to belabor it. You don't have to make it perfect. It's not what's going to go into your proposal. It's just ideas for what could go into your proposal. So repeat this exercise, practice it so that you ingrain the habit of thinking about positive audiences. You get more used to thinking about positive audiences and thinking about what they would like in your work. Okay, to summarize, if we start thinking about negative audiences and negative audience response, if we start remembering that mean teacher from years ago, that raises anxiety, it distracts us from our work, it inhibits our prefrontal cortex where imagination and logical processing are happening, so it makes it harder to work. To counter that anxiety, practice thinking about a positive audience. Actively think about a positive audience. Open a blank page and write about a positive audience. In addition to helping reduce anxiety, it will focus your attention back on your manuscript and on what you want to write in your manuscript to reach your audience. I hope you have found this video helpful. If you have, please like, subscribe, comment below. Let me know what you think I got right. Let me know what you think I got wrong. I would love to hear from you. Thanks very much for watching.